We have reached Parashas Savo once again, the parshah of the brachas and klalos, the blessings and the curses, always in advance of Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. The timing is quite good because it's supposed to put into perspective life and life's goals and the things that we're supposed to keep in mind at all times in order to be able to appreciate that the priorities in life. That's very important. Well, there's an extremely important point in this week's parsha that has a lot to do with what everything's about. What we're supposed to be accomplishing in life. We're supposed to be focusing on where things go wrong, and they have gone wrong very dramatically. All the klalos in the parsha have come true. In fact, it's quite a history lesson. Everything that's mentioned in Parashat Parashat Savo, all the klalos, all the curses that God said would come to the Jewish people if we didn't keep His Torah, they all came true. Nothing left to fulfill. Even the remembering of the land, as Israel came back into the possession of the Jewish people in 1948, just as the Kodesh Baruch Hu promised, just after the Holocaust, just as the Torah seems to mention. After that, Kibbutz Galius. Clearly, we are in the phase of Kibbutz Galius, at least phase one. And whatever's happening now, it's basically just finishing off what's left over. It's left over in terms of what has to be accomplished in advance of history coming to its conclusion before Mashiach. And primarily because basically we're not ready. I mean, history is ready in as much as all that's supposed to happen, take place, has in fact taken place, has occurred. And all the preparation from a historical point of view has occurred. But the Jewish people still seem to be missing the point, and therefore the final preparations in advance of Mashiach's arrival, Yishmael, which is why it's not really included in the Arba Galus. There are 4 exiles after which Mashiach is supposed to come. The 5th seems to be Yishmael. There's all kinds of discussions to exactly where that fits in. To the picture, it's not mentioned in the Midrashim in terms of the 4 exiles of the 2nd verse of Ma'aseh Bereshis, where it says the land was null and void, and there was darkness upon the face of the deep. Likewise by Avraham, Brisman Basarim, because Yishmael is a whole different level of preparation, a whole different level of fine-tuning the Jewish people for the sake of Yemos HaMashiach, making the separation primarily between the Jewish people and Mammon. It's interesting because in the Gemara, the Talmud Bavli mentions that the reason for the destruction of the second base of Mikdash was sinas chidam, unwarranted hatred, baseless hatred is brought down. But in the Yerushalmi in Yuma, speaking about the same issue, the same matter in terms of the Churban Bayis Sheni, it happens to mention Ahavas Mammon as well, the love of property plus the sinas chidam, right? The actual connection to materialism was also a part of the reason for the Beis Hamikdash being destroyed. Usually you find they go hand in hand. When people love property, physical possessions too much, they'll tend to hate other people because of jealousy and all kinds of negative emotions. If people are content physically, materially, they tend to have a much easier time getting along with one another. Yishmael comes against materialism. That's clear. That's really what's going on over here. And anyhow, in the Parashas Savo mentions, it says, starts off talking about the Jewish people will come there to Israel, and eventually it talks about the vidui that the Jewish people have to say when they bring up their bikurim, the first fruits, and they go through a whole history lesson about how the Jewish people were almost eliminated by Lavan and all the enemies through history, which we mentioned also in the Haggadah, and then eventually gets to the point towards the end. And it says, or towards the end of the first Aliyah, it says, "V'samachta b'chol hatov asher nasan lecha Hashem Elokecha u'leisecha ata v'halevi v'hager asher b'kirbecha." And you, v'samachta, you will take joy, you will have joy from all the good which God has given to you, God your God has given to you and to your house, and to you and the Levi and the convert which is amongst you, in your midst, right? So this, encapsulates the whole flow. That what Bikurim represent and the Vidui, and really it's the symbol of all of Yiddishkeit. This is what Judaism is supposed to bring out, which is so contrary to what so many people have experienced over history, not just in terms of the anti-Semitism, but internally. The way that Judaism seems to be presented in chinuch and in families, a lack of simchah. We tried to have simchah, But and unfortunately, the lack of simcha is the reason why so many people leave the fold. The reason why they're going to the Western world and have changed religion, so to speak, over time is because people who are happy, people who are having simcha, will tend to stay where they are and enjoy what they're doing. And it's such an important point that after all of this, after it goes through the brochas, it goes through the klalas and everything that's supposed to happen historically, the Jewish people do not listen. First of all, the brocha, if we do listen to Kodesh Baruch Hu, but the klalas, the curses, if we don't listen to Kodesh Baruch Hu, the Torah, and then it wraps up the entire thing, more or less, towards the end. This is Chof Ches, and the pasuk is Mem Zayin, right? After going to all the different curses, V'hayu v'cha le'oisu mofes u'v'za'acha ad olam. You will be a sign and wonder in your seed forever. How all this could happen to God's chosen people, how this could happen to the Jewish people, right? And then it says, and it gives, the reason is obvious, because you did not listen to my Torah and do the mitzvahs properly. That's what it's saying. And then the Torah throws us for an incredible loop. It adds and says over here, why did all this happen to you? Why have you experienced all this bad, all this terrible destruction and loss of good and accomplishment? Why? Because you did not serve God, your God. You did the service. You may have served Him, but you didn't serve Him b'simcha, with joy, uvetuv levav merov kol, and with joy, right, and a goodness of heart from all the good that was given to you. In other words, you served the Kodesh Baruch Hu. You had the good. What was missing? What was the missing element from all of this? The simcha. There's a lack of simcha. You didn't have the amount of simcha you should have had. For all the good that the Kodesh Baruch Hu gave to you was lacking. You may have learned Torah, you did all the mitzvahs, whatever. You were loyal Jews in that respect, but the simcha, which of course is the main Kiddush Hashem, the main sanctification, right? And this goes back to what Moshe Rabbeinu says. What does the Kodesh Baruch Hu ask from you? That you should fear Him. But the fear does not mean fear of punishment. It means that you buy into the reality to such a degree that living by Torah and doing the mitzvahs is your hashkaf. It's the way you look at the world too. It's what you believe in as well. And if you believe in it, everything becomes a labor of love, we said back in Parashas Ekev. It all becomes a labor of love. And people look at you and say, look at that person putting on tefillin, boy, is he enjoying himself. And look at the way these people keep Shabbos, the halachas of Shabbos, not like making Shabbos chol, but keeping Shabbos on a level of Kedusha. And look at the Kedusha and the joy these people have. That's the Kiddush Hashem. And people don't just see the loyalty. Look at the Arab religion. They're also loyal to their philosophy, but they're miserable. They're miserable in the end. And Catholicism and Christianity. All through history, people have had to live lives that go contrary to human nature. Living by rules is easy, in a sense. Every society has them. Western society is no different. We have tons and tons and tons of rules, and mitzvahs and commandments, and fear of punishment, it's all there. What's supposed to be the difference? When you have those rules, and you have joy too. Most people say, well, to have the joy, you have to get rid of the rules. So they dump the rules. They run away from Torah. They run away from Western society. Whatever. They run away from all the laws. They do their own thing. Now I'm b'simcha. That's simple. That's the life of the Yetzer Hara. But who can live by all the rules and have simcha as well? And if you don't have simcha, try to sell Judaism to the next generation. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. Why? Why should I have to suffer the rest of my life? It takes Mesiras Nefesh to get to a point where you're old enough and mature enough to say, even though I'm not enjoying myself, I'll do it anyhow. Most people don't last that long. And it's not what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants. Sometimes you have no choice. And there are times for tzaddikim and people in high levels, HaKadosh Baruch Hu tests them to see if they will have that joy. Even though, or they'll do the mitzvahs, even though they lack the joy. But derech klal, in general, there has to be the simcha, the joy. But you'll ask that Judaism doesn't always promote it. Getting up early for davening is not a joyful thing, unless you love getting up early. Keeping Shabbos creates a lot of stress. Built into Judaism is gvul and borders and boundaries and time limits and all kinds of details and technicalities that for the most part make it difficult